Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Green Room. We're here at DisrupTV, and we got our amazing guests. We introduce them every week in reverse order of appearance. And, of course, we ask them where they're coming in from and what they'll be talking about today in short form. So, Zach, welcome. What are we talking about? And I see your books everywhere.
Oh, thanks. Hey, Ray. I'm calling in from Colorado, Colorado State University in Fort Collins, Colorado. And I'm going to be talking about how the skill to show people how they're significant is going to be one of the most coveted skills within the next generation of leadership, because we're facing what I call a mattering deficit, an epidemic of insignificance.
Very true. What does purpose mean in an age of AI? Do you matter or not? Very wonderful. Paula, welcome. Where are you coming in from? What are we talking about?
Hey, I am coming in from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Go Packers. And we'll be talking about my new book, Lead Well, and the 5 different mindsets that help leaders be able to engage, retain, and inspire their teams.
Wow. Were you watching the NFL draft outside in that stadium?
I would have been there, but I was on the road for a speaking engagement. So I was watching from my TV in my hotel room.
Oh, wow. Lombardi was looking from high above.
Wow.
All right, Sergey, where are you coming in from? What are we talking about?
I'm from Los Gatos, California, and I'm going to talk about what it means to build self-optimizing agents when organizations gradually adopt agents and unlock operational excellence.
Very cool. Well, we're going to go deep on introspection in this episode, joined with my amazing co-host, Vala Afshar, and our wonderful producer, Elle. Elle, ready for the count?
Yes, let's go. 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us on DisrupTV. My name is Vala Afshar. I'm the Chief Evangelist at Salesforce and your co-host for the next hour. We welcome you to follow us on X at DisrupTV Show. It's my pleasure to introduce my co-host, Ray Wang. He's the CEO and founder of Constellation Research. He's the best-selling author of Everybody Wants to Rule the World. I see Ray on TV just about every day, Fox Business, Bloomberg, CNBC. I actually see him behind the anchor desks often, so I know he's on the road. He's one of the top futurists to follow on X at RWANG0. Welcome, Ray Wang, to DisrupTV.
Hey, thanks a lot. Well, I'm here with my awesome co-host, Vala Afshar. And if you know, he's the Chief Digital Evangelist at Salesforce. But more importantly, you see him everywhere, speaking, innovating, keynoting, all over the place. And of course, he's the author of multiple books, including Boundless, a new mindset for unlimited business success, and a #1 seller on Amazon. So when he's not speaking, he's not putting insightful and inspirational tweets or hosting, keynoting, or leading events at Salesforce, you can find him speaking on business TV outlets such as Bloomberg, ABC, and of course, posting insightful analyses, especially on this show on ZDNet. But it's not about us. It's about our great guests. And who do we have to kick it off in this introspective edition of DisrupTV?
Oh, here I am. Okay, great. It's our pleasure to introduce Sergey Davidovich, who's the co-founder and president of SparkBeyond, pioneer of the AI-powered Always Optimized platform. David is co-founder, president of SparkBeyond, and this is a platform that allows generative AI to drive constant improvements in business operations. The Always Optimized platform extends generative AI reasoning capabilities to KPI optimization, discovering complex patterns across disparate data sources. A serial entrepreneur and technological visionary, Sergey has led the R&D teams for a number of disruptive startups, including Delver, which is acquired by Sears, and New Brand Analytics, acquired by Sprinkler. Deeply involved in the machine learning community from its beginning, Sergey holds several patents, US patents, and awards. Welcome, Sergey, to DisrupTV.
Hey, thanks for inviting me.
Great to have you.
We're really excited to have you here, and especially when we think about what's going on in this model. How has the role of AI evolved in business decision making? Right, we're thinking about the end point of AI ultimately is about making better decisions. What do you see as the big leap, that next big leap in AI-driven optimization?
Yeah, so I would say that this big leap is already in quite advanced stages, but it's not evenly distributed.
Wait, so it's here and not everybody's seeing it. So some groups are seeing it better than others.
That's very often the case with AI, right? If we think about the big splash of AI in November 2022, right, where ChatGPT was released.
Yep.
The community has been playing with those models for like 2 years.
Oh yeah.
Before that moment, but it was not mainstream, right? So it's very interesting to start sensing the agentic AI, which is the next leap, starting to emerge. So basically, if we think about the hype cycle and the different stages, OpenAI has defined it very well by saying that step 1 is having the LLMs, right? The brains. Step 2 is chatbots, right? It's just a very thin interactive envelope to allow us users to communicate to them and for them to follow instructions. The next step is okay. Let's allow them to reason, right? And instead of just outputting tokens, words, have some inner voice, some inner thought. And then the next step after that is agents, right? Agents is about connecting them to other actors, other employees, customers, tools, knowledge bases, right? And giving these brains also the ability to interact with the outside world. This is when it becomes really interesting, right? Because just being a brain in a jar is not very empowering, and that's sort of like the big unlock moment that LLMs have been waiting for. And around this, we see plenty of companies, a lot of innovation around giving them memory, giving them access to tools, creating those standards for tools like MCP, right? Making MCPs discoverable, right? It's a Cambrian explosion of innovation, and things happen literally every day, particularly if you follow open source. What we are particularly fascinated by at SparkBeyond is the moment that an agent takes on a role in an enterprise. Basically, that agent inherits the same KPIs, the same metrics that its human counterparts would have, right? So a sales agent would be measured by its ability to convert. A customer support agent would be measured by escalation rate, customer satisfaction, resolution rate, etc. So how do we drive operational excellence in the era of AI agents?
You've written extensively about this. You recently wrote, so we're talking about a shift from static automation to dynamic systems capable of continuous learning and adaptation. You talked about 2 key components, defining key KPIs as actionable objectives for the agents. You also wrote about enabling continuous improvement through real-time learning. In your most recent article, you talked about execution capabilities are essential, and these agents can complete tasks on our behalf. So they're not in assistive mode; they're autonomous. But true autonomy in agentic AI, you write, requires more than just task completion. It demands strategic intelligence, which we want to learn more about. But you said at the heart of strategic intelligence lies hypothesis testing. That's the cornerstone of a scientific method. Can you talk to us what you mean by strategic intelligence and what at the core is this hypothesis testing?
Right. So it all it's all derived from giving an agent awareness of the KPI, of what it's actually being measured by. And if you think about the way that agents are defined today, you sort of prompt it with its role. You say you have access to these tools and you have access to this external knowledge. In the more advanced versions of agents, you may also define workflows and multi-agent interaction, but that's pretty much it, right? They operate within this simulation, within this sandbox, unaware of what it means to be great at what they do. So strategic is first understanding who am I, why am I doing this, what is the organizational context, and where does it integrate into workflows outside of my immediate role, and how do I improve? The moment that you give them the ability to do that, that's the moment that you can actually start talking about hypothesis. So what is a hypothesis? It's a question, right? Hey, what if I try to change that in my prompt? What if I acquire these additional tools that I can operate? Will it improve my ability to handle this task or subtask, right? Or it could be a question about my performance. Do I usually perform better when my customers are in a certain micro segment, and or maybe something to do with the dialogue? Maybe should I be nicer, right? So all these are questions. Now there is an infinite number of questions that you may ask, and the answer is in the data, right? So if agents produce enormous amounts of think about like transcriptions of their calls or like logs of the chat. That's also linked to CRMs, right? Like Salesforce, ERP, and other systems, ticketing systems. You can start triangulating and discovering patterns. What does actually correlate with the KPI, with each one of those metrics that I mentioned? So essentially what we have at SparkBeyond is a machine that asks, it's almost like the inverse, the opposite of LLMs, because it's a machine, instead of a machine that gives answers, it's one that asks millions of questions, writes code for each one of them, runs the code on the data, and measures the correlations, right?
So Sergey, this is your point around like hypothesis engine. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
And what you're trying to achieve here is really get to this business optimization of goals that are being set up there, and you keep querying the hypothesis agent really with the goal of actually maintaining peak performance. How do you achieve that peak performance in that cycle? Because is it the iteration of questions that are being asked, and it's how well those questions are designed to eliminate false positives, false negatives as you get more precise, or is it knowing when to find new signals to add into that structure?
Yeah, in fact, it's both of these. And essentially, we have not invented the process of optimization. It's just about adapting and applying the same very simple process, which is understand what drives your performance, understand what needs to be changed in order to improve the performance based on what we learned about what drives performance, run A/B test, right, or experiment. And if it's better, that's where you have the change management policy to actually improve the agent.
So it's high volume, rapid iterations. How do you define better in terms of the outcome? Because that's the secret sauce. I mean, I can keep running these. I just need to be smart enough to know when to ask for new types of signals, but I can't make the judgment of whether it's better or not. How are you making that determination?
Right. Well, the data actually is the best judge, right? Because if I take all the historical data of all the conversations, simulate that new agent, using the historical conversations and measure the same KPIs, the same metrics, such as conversion rate or resolution rate, that's where I can actually compare the previous version and the new version and know which one is better.
Okay. Yeah. And you write about this. You say that the truly autonomous businesses are optimized with multi-agent systems. And in your latest post, you gave a marketing example. You said, you have a campaign management agent, you have a customer segmentation agent, you have a content optimization agent, a mixed model agent that can, test performance metrics. Do you envision a super agent that's looking at the specific tasks inside of marketing and coordinate the outcome and determines my conversion rates are improving, my lifetime value, my propensity to buy, my awareness? Or all these agents have specific KPIs that are being measured against, and then there's an aggregate view that shows, look, I'm actually incrementally increasing my revenue. So all of these subsystems seem to be aligned to my business strategy and goals.
Yeah, it's a very, very interesting question. And in fact, it's more complex than it seems. It has to do with...
All of this is complex, by the way. I mean, for you, it's not because you're building it.
You're building these, they're in the back of your head.
So here's why it's interesting. It depends on the scope of change that you allow those agents to make. If it's all about just make yourself better, but operate within the same workflow in the same system, that's one mode. And the other mode, this is where you would typically bring the McKinseys of the world, right? Is we need to rethink the entire system, right? It's not just like make component A better and component B better independently. Maybe actually you don't need one of them. Maybe you can re-engineer the entire system of systems in a way that their definition, their boundaries become different. The workflow is different. So in the latter mode, this is where you actually want to have an external, let's call it McKinsey agent, right? Which is going to look externally from the system and analyze the system as a whole. While in addition to this, you also want to have like a coach for each one of those agents. You can also think about the coach as an agent, and the goal of that coach is to improve the other agent. And essentially the scope of that coach is going to be very, very localized.
Okay.
So it helps to think about this metaphor.
You mentioned coach, so let me just try to, in my head, figure out an athletic analogy. When you think of world-class athletes, Olympic champions, professional athletes, they're healthy. So, they're healthy. They're typically healthy individuals, extremely well conditioning. So they're working on their strength and their speed and their endurance, and so they can run a marathon or run a sprint or jump high. So conditioning, and then talent development. They're learning new skills all the time. Does SparkBeyond help agents with their conditioning and their expanded talent? Because or does it help with the healthiness, the fitness of an agent? Talk to us about where do you view your company serving as a coach, and where the agent is an athlete and you're constantly improving their conditioning and their talent so they can do bigger, more complex work consistently. Because I define the difference between a prodigy and a champion. A prodigy can do complex work, but not consistently. A champion can do complex work consistently well. That's why they become champions.
Right.
Where does SparkBeyond? Do you help agents become champions?
Yeah, so it's the ability to operate at their peak performance consistently within the constraints that you have in the organization. And there are constraints. Some constraints may be regulatory. Some constraints have to do with the fact that you may actually improve the KPI of one agent, but that will actually negatively impact the KPI of another agent. So you need to have this systemic view and constantly analyzing the trade-offs. It's very easy to reduce reduce customer churn, right? But through this also hurt your profit margins.
Right. See, that's the amazing, what you're building in order to be able to orchestrate and know that every touch point has a ripple effect, positive or negative. There's external positive externalities, negative externalities. It's every enterprise is trying to solve what you're building.
The signal intelligence and signal optimization have is kind of like what you do with event-driven architecture, right? You're firing off events as you need based on contextual pieces that are there. The question I have for you is actually a little bit different. Is you do it for customer here, but I noticed that you're also doing on the industry 4.0 side, right? Which is really the ability to do at the edge, right? And having that network on the edge for the active inference is going to pick up. That's going to get very interesting. So are you guys pushing into the active inference side to be able to get the situational awareness and all the data and network signals on the edge?
I find this so I find this very fascinating and exciting simply because like on the edge, LLMs are now orders of magnitude more capable than just like a year ago, right? We just saw that like the release of Qwen 3, right, which pushed it even further. So it is exciting that you have more IQ, more intelligence on the edge than ever before, and that's empowering.
We're here with Sergey Davidovich. He's the co-founder and president of SparkBeyond, pioneer of AI-powered, always optimized platform. So thanks a lot for being here on the show. Really appreciate it. Come back more. We're going to be talking more about agents, autonomous items, self-driving capabilities, and of course, really where the future is headed. So thanks a lot for being on the show. Happy Friday.
Thank you, Sergey.
Thank you.
Just a reminder, like it doesn't matter what company you're a part of, we're in the business of manufacturing intelligence and work. I don't even want to use manufacturing. I think it's like auto factoring, because
it's auto factoring. It's true.
Auto factoring intelligence and work. Anyway, that's a whole other. Okay. Our next guest, we're honored to have Paula Davis, author of Lead Well: 5 Mindsets to Engage, Retain, and Inspire Your Team. Book was just launched last month. Brand new book. Paula is also founder and CEO of Stress and Resilience Institute. For 15 years, she has been a trusted advisor for leading organizations of all sizes, helping them work better. Paula is globally recognized expert on effects of workplace stress, burnout prevention, workplace well-being. In fact, she was the author of Beating Burnout at Work: Why Teams Hold the Secret to Well-being and Resilience. Paula's work has been featured, Ray, even more than New York Times, Oprah Magazine, Washington Post, all media outlets. She's also a contributor to some publications you may have heard of, like Forbes, Fast Company, Psychology Today. Welcome, Paula, to DisrupTV, and congratulations on your new book.
Thank you. I'm so excited to chat with you both.
Thank you.
We're so excited to have you here. And I think one of the biggest questions we'll be asking is really a question about, where we are in terms of, humanity and purpose, and more importantly, thinking about what that means in terms of leadership. Why this book? Why at this point in time? Like, what was the crux that led you to think about driving this and putting your ideas onto paper?
Yes, it's such a fantastic question. And it really started, I would say, about 4 years or so ago when my first book came out. And we're in the middle of the pandemic in 2021 when Beating Burnout at Work came out. And I did so much initially virtually, and then, in person as things eased up, so much work with leaders and teams around the topic of burnout. And because I approach it in a little bit of a different way, I approach it in sort of a systems-based leaders and teams, kind of way. And as I dug into the root causes of stress and disengagement and what was ailing teams and what have you, I realized that the same themes kept coming up over and over again with the leaders and teams with whom I worked.
Yeah.
And I realized not only were those themes consistent, but there wasn't really a language or vocabulary. Leaders would say, I would love to help my teams, or I want to reduce burnout, or however they would phrase it. I don't know where to start. I don't know what to do. I have to make my numbers, by the way. And I feel like I don't have time, and, but I care, and all of this. And I realized that there was something to say in terms of helping them fill that gap and think differently about what they needed to sort of come from their leadership style with in order to address some of these root causes.
Those are really big issues, and especially questions when we think about what's happening. I mean, everybody is facing this, but more importantly, it's at the organizational scale now.
Yes. And that is, I always start my programs, typically started in the same way. And I keep switching the title of the slide, and I'm sort of at work is a lot right now. You've got the pandemic aftermath, which I think a lot of leaders still drastically underappreciate the way that the pandemic really changed us psychologically in terms of what we're looking for in our work, what matters to us at work and in life, particularly. So we're asking bigger questions now about meaning and significance and mattering and all of those good things. But you've got massive uncertainty. We had uncertainty throughout the entire pandemic, only to be ushered into more geopolitical and economic uncertainty, in adding the AI layer onto that as well. This is just a lot for us to be handling right now from a psychological standpoint. And so leaders need to really be thinking differently about what will really resonate and engage their teams.
Great topic. Talk to us about mindset. How do you develop a lead well mindset, and how can you start implementing some of the components that make up the mindset?
Sure. And so the reason why I came to the title very late for this book, but the concept of mindsets was one that I had and stuck with really almost from the beginning part of when I started to write the book, in part because I really wanted to plant the notion that leaders should be and need to be thinking differently in this climate in our world of work. And so I really started to orient the mindsets that I share in the book around the different sort of root causes or deeper issues that kept coming up over and over again in my conversations with leaders. And so it's a blend of a number of different things. And I always tell folks, start where you see the biggest need or the biggest issue on your team. But it's really a blend of what I call sticky recognition and mattering. And with that also, promoting thriving with what I call the ABC needs. So we need a measure of autonomy, belonging, which is connection, and challenge and growth in order to feel like we're growing at work. A little bit of workload sustainability, which was a difficult and interesting chapter to write. A little bit of team and organizational resilience, and then a little bit of values alignment and meaning in our work. So it really boils down to good teaming strategies and good human strategies to help.
So you mentioned in the book that it's really important to go back to me and we.
Yes.
And that's one of a foundational point. And what happened? I always thought it was a team. Did we shift too much to me at one point, or shift too much to we? Did we miss something along the way here?
Yeah, so that's my way of basically just saying that if we're going to look through this lens of whatever we call it, right? Engagement, well-being, motivation, mattering, burnout prevention, what have you. What a lot of organizations started to do and a lot of leaders started to do was they started to offer individual type programs and strategies and benefits for folks to sort of fix the individual or fix the individual's stress. And that's a great first step. And we still need to preserve that piece, but we're not going to solve for these issues because we're not addressing the causes until we start to bring in the rest of the system, that we side, right? So we have to be looking systemically at how the individual piece connects with leadership behaviors, which connects with the way that we orient our teams, to really look at systemically and collectively how we actually get to move the needle now and take that next step in the well-being conversation.
When you're advising or you're in a situation where you're meeting an executive to advise or a team, how quickly can you tell if they're leading well or not? What's the tell that you're like, oh, I got my work cut out for me. This is going to be a lot. I'm going to have to sculpt this clay, and it's going to take some time.
The tell actually, yeah, it usually comes pretty early on, and it's usually because somebody on the team, somewhere in the organization, is reaching out to me because there is a problem. Like they're identifying a stress issue or a burnout issue, and oftentimes it's phrased like that. It's phrased around the problem. Our team, we're going through a transition, or there's been a merger and there's distress or stress or
change management. Yeah.
The problem is usually identified right away. And then when I go in, it's just a matter for me of, asking some questions. And I have a resilient teams inventory that I sometimes will give folks to really start to get into what is the nitty gritty, what are the sources or the problems driving the issue. But that's usually where we start. The problem is usually presented to me, and then it's just a matter of me trying to figure out, where are the entry points? Where do we need to start with some of this to start to unravel, and then go from there.
Were you able to identify any blind spots that you may have had in the process of writing the book? I know writing a book is such a rigid process, and you have to research and you interview and you try to connect and be a synthesizer. I know often my experience has been by the time I'm done, I realized some of the dominant logic I had was not accurate. Did you uncover any aha moments where you thought, wow, this is a new revelation?
And I know we'll get into this with Zach, but that sticky recognition and mattering piece was, for me, definitely a personal blind spot. Like, I thought I was doing all of that really well, and to a certain extent I am. But I realized that I wasn't necessarily being as upfront with people in my own life about their significance to me as I could have been. And it has really, really caused me to slow down and open up more in terms of how I communicate with the people on my own team, with my family, how I show up with people in my community, and really being open and letting them know when they've made an impact on me. That piece in particular was a huge eye opener for me.
Can I just say, what other show do you have a best-selling author identifying a blind spot that they have, referencing another best-selling author who's next on the show? You just made our week. Thank you.
It's very true. It's really true. And I interviewed Zach for the book, and I adore him and his research, and his book is going to be phenomenal. So I'm not doing that. I'm doing that really honestly because he was very central.
This was not planned. This was
not planned, but we will hand you off on the couch later. Yeah. We'll get you both on at the same time for Mag Shot.
Awesome. But yeah. Sorry, Ray. Go ahead. That was
a
great moment in our history of DisrupTV. Go ahead.
We do lots of fun things here. But let's talk about, you got some leadership practices that you talk about. There's 6 leadership practices. I'm not asking you to choose a favorite. They seem to work very well. They're intertwined with each other. I think that was by design, based on when I was reading that. Tell us about these 6 leadership practices, because there's a thematic genesis to this.
Sure. So if we're talking about, there's a couple of different pieces. Are you specifically talking about the leadership practices that foster meaningful work, or are we talking about just some leadership practices generally that are sprinkled?
No, this is for the meaningful work. I think that was a very important, that's a very important part of the book.
It was a very important part of the book, and that was actually very eye-opening to me as well, to realize there really is a way to operationalize more meaning and values alignment in our work. And the first piece is to communicate the work's bigger impact. And I talk about that a little in my first book, but again, really wanted to go into more detail with it in this book. When we know that we are making an impact and we're aware of the impact that we are making in our world of work, it just ignites a whole cascade of better, what I call psychological fuel. It's just like, it gets our engine running. And that's the thing that it's like, it's Monday morning and I'm, jumping out of bed, excited to go to work. It's when we know that we're connected to that impact, and it really is a big deal.
Yep.
The second piece is recognizing and nurturing potential. So when you see people and, acknowledging their strengths and talking about the value that they add, and recognizing when you see people who want to be challenged and grow in different ways, that you actually are able to make that happen and help. Fostering personal connections. So again, that community, that sense of community and building strong relationships becomes really important. This piece was also eye-opening, and it's discussing values during the onboarding process. So when you onboard, talk about what is meaningful work in your organization. And the last time that I had any sort of onboarding, it was just like HR forms and things like that. It was very functional versus human, right? Which is, here's what our company and our organization is about. Here are people actually sharing stories about what they find to be, values alignment in the organization. It could be a whole just eye-opening different way to actually onboard people and get them really connected with that sense of values is huge. And then modeling values-based behavior. So this one is also huge. When leaders don't walk the talk, it is, it's just like, let's open the door to people, like giving them an opportunity to potentially go somewhere else. So we need to see our leaders really modeling those values, and then giving employees a sense of autonomy. We need that flexibility and control, not just about one.
That's a very hard one. So
it's a very hard one. And I talk about that in the book on purpose, expanding the conversation, because we narrow it to where and when we work, and then we get snagged into the hybrid, remote, return to office conversation. But it's really about Do I have the latitude to make the decisions that I need to make? Do I have the latitude and flexibility and control to form the relationships and create the community that I want to? And so we can have the career that I want to in this organization. So we can expand the conversation around how we talk about autonomy. I think about it as our need to choose our own adventure.
So important, so important. Another topic, and I love autonomy. The thing I love most about my job currently is the level of autonomy afforded to me. When I think of another important element of leadership, it's resilience and team success, resilience. I live in Boston, so, just like Green Bay, we've experienced championship teams.
Yeah.
And what's common with whether it's the Celtics, the Red Sox, the Patriots, Bruins, Revolution, the teams that have won, they definitely, the year they won, demonstrated resilience. But when I reflect on my career, resilience wasn't an easy road for me. It was intentional struggle. It was working for demanding leaders. It was painful. And at the time, I appreciated that they were leading well because they didn't necessarily show me a graceful path of learning resilience. But upon reflection, I now admire the journey I was on, and it made me a better person. Is there a way to gracefully teach resilience, or do you need to feel a little bit of pain, because character is shaped based on the struggles we have? But is there a right way to do that?
Yeah, I love that. And so you're highlighting a few different important pieces about resilience. So first of all, resilience is a skill set. It's a set of skills that can be learned and taught and practiced and improved. And oftentimes we do it, we just don't realize that what we are actually doing is promoting resilience or getting us closer to that. But it is also very messy. So I think we also tend to think about resilience in these big, grandiose, like huge ways. And those are the big stories that we see, but they're shaped very much by, both our big and small obstacles, challenges, failures, setbacks, problems, stressors. So if we're talking about resilience, we're talking about that constellation of stuff. We're talking about the not so great stuff that we have to go through, and what is the process that we take to not just bounce back, but to also what I call bounce forward. What are we supposed to learn from the challenges? How is it going to teach us? What is the meaning behind the problem, the failure, the setback, the obstacle that we're supposed to take, so that when the next challenge happens, I remember some of that stuff that I went through, and I can kind of leverage it and pull it so that me or my team or the organization itself can get through the next challenge a little bit better, a little bit quicker. Maybe it's not quite, it's not a level 10 painful, it's a level 3 painful instead. But that resilience is very messy, and it ebbs and flows, and it's not about always being perfect and put together. And there's a lot of that mess that's involved with it.
I think it was benevolence that helped me through it, meaning I knew the intention of my leader was for me to be successful. So because I believed the intention, I was willing to go through the painful part of building resilience. I don't know, it's been said, people are not afraid of failure, they're afraid of blame. And I always felt I wasn't going to get blamed as I made mistakes. Doers make mistakes, and I made a ton of mistakes. And there was consequences and accountability, but I always felt safe that there wasn't going to be finger pointing. And so anyway, that level of autonomy and safe space and benevolence helped me get through some difficult but meaningful
really massive cultural transformation. Vala, I think about how my parents grew up and their framework and their structure.
Dude, you and I are immigrants, so we know. Resilience.
I'm playing an immigrant, but yes. But the point being is immigrant, the approach that people brought from a different world or different perspective, and trying to match it into. Even the East Coast is different than the West Coast, or different areas in terms of tech startups versus, banking, right? You see those cultural differences. What's required to overcome that when you implement those mindsets? Your last chapter talks about getting this implemented, getting the mindsets in place. How do you take into account the cultural aspects, right?
Well, and I think that's an important point to mention. And I think that's why what I always encourage leaders to do, when I think of culture, it's hard for me to get my head and my arms around big C culture, the big, huge organization itself. And I encourage, and break it down in terms of what is your team culture, right? What in your own little corner of the world where you have a little bit of sphere and influence, what are you seeing are the issues? What are the problems? Where do you need to start? What do you need to build up better? And start with that particular mindset, start with that particular space and move forward from there. Because I've seen over and over, the ripple effects that are had when you start in one spot. And then, if you're acknowledging me and my work and I have a keen sense of my impact, now that high workload that I'm tasked with is still pretty high and there's some stress with it, but I process it a little bit better because I know I'm valued here and I know I'm significant, right? And so, picking one of those lanes to start with and implementing some of the, what I call TNTs or tiny noticeable things. So it doesn't have to be these huge wild shifts in your culture and the way that you do things. It's just intentionally recognizing that very small behaviors done consistently can really have an outsized impact.
I love how you localize culture. Culture is what happens when the managers leave the room. Like, in the absence of authority, are you doing the right thing for the right reason for the right people? So I love the fact that you make it actionable and for people to understand their circles of influence so they can get the most out of it. That's great feedback.
It's intention-driven, mindful, purposeful. Check out the book from Paula Davis, author of Lead Well, 5 Mindsets to Engage, Retain, and Inspire Your Team. We're going from burnout to leadership. Thank you so much for sharing your insights.
Thank you both. This was fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you. We could have talked to our first 2 guests for the entire hour. That was awesome.
And then,
what about me?
This is the cleanup hitter spot. This is where we have a guest usually come, hit a grand slam, bring it all home, tie a ball around everything we've talked about. And there's no more of an important time in the 30 years I've been in tech to tackle this topic of mattering, given the fact we're talking about digital labor, cognitive downloads, autonomous businesses. The new hybrid work is humans and machines, and talk about potential void for mattering in that construct. Zach Mercurio, author of The Power of Mattering, How Leaders Can Create Culture of Significance. Right now, his book is #1 new release in human resources, personal management on Amazon. So we're talking about, we're talking with a best-selling author here. Zach is a researcher, leadership development facilitator, speaker, specializing in purposeful leadership, mattering, and meaningful work. Zach advises leaders and organizations worldwide on practice for building culture that promotes well-being, motivation, and performance. He holds a PhD in organizational learning performance and change from Colorado State University, and he serves as a senior fellow at the Center for Meaning and Purpose as an instructor in organizational learning performance change program. Welcome, Zach, to Disrupt TV. Congratulations on your best-selling new book.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. This show is like a collage. It's like a collage of guests. That's how I see it. And I love it.
It totally is. We're going to put Paul on stage. Actually, I should have Paula, just so you know, you're coming in. I mean, look at that. I got you side by side right here.
It's the first time we had an author speak about a major blind spot while writing a book about a guest who was next. So that was kind of awesome.
We can't beat that. So we'll bring you back. We'll get back to the green room. But Chris, the show is yours. I mean, this is about you. And, let's spend some time talking about mattering, right? Vala set it up properly, right? Age of AI. What's the purpose of humans? Like, why do we matter, right? It's going to be one of those deep questions we'll be asking for the next decade. Lay out your thesis.
Human beings have 2 primal fears and 2 primal needs, right? The fear of being devalued. And this is from birth, right? Like when you were born, the first thing you did was you reached out your arms to find a caretaker to care for you. I mean, your survival depends on mattering to someone. It's hardwired into our brains. Nobody would be watching the show right now if at some point in their lives they hadn't mattered enough to someone else to keep them alive.
Yep.
So the primal fear of being devalued and then the primal need of being valued by those around us is something that we're born with. It's hardwired into us. That instinct turns into the fundamental need to feel seen, heard, valued, and needed. And feeling significant to one another is called mattering. And we have the fear of being helpless, of not being able to really do anything of much consequence. And that fear of being helpless is also complemented by the need to add value. So we need to feel valued and we need to know that we add value. And that's what this concept of mattering that's been around in the psychological research for 40 years is really about. It's the feeling of being significant to the human beings around us that comes from feeling valued and knowing how we add value. And it gets at a very core fundamental, elemental survival instinct that's even more fundamental than belonging or inclusion, because like belonging is feeling welcomed and accepted in a group. Inclusion is feeling that you can take an active role in the group, but mattering is feeling significant to people in the group. It's feeling that your tribe, your community, your team wouldn't be complete without you.
Chanting our inner Gordon Flett here. Going deep.
It makes me think about the importance of, we talk about artificial intelligence, relational intelligence, because we are the last generation of business leaders to manage people only. And we're now and our first guest talked about autonomous businesses, where we're going to have a hybrid workforce of smart software, because for the first time in humanity, we're no longer building tools to help people do their jobs. We're building tools that does the work. We're, as I mentioned, we're auto-factoring intelligence and work. Listen to NVIDIA CEO or Salesforce CEO or Alphabet or Google or Amazon. The largest companies are talking about billions of dollars invested towards machines that do tasks for us. So how do we build relational intelligence in a hybrid workforce where we are now going to be challenged in terms of belonging and mattering, when my colleague next to me can do the work faster at a scale that people cannot achieve, intelligence that it's unlike, it took 10 years to become a Go or a chess master. Right. And the software played itself for 4 days, and it's unbeaten. You can't beat it anymore.
Wow, so, intelligence is doubling every 7 months. I mean, it's crazy.
My point is, when we talk about experience and effort, that the way we traditionally measure mattering and belonging, and now experience and effort is in a snap. Paint this picture for us.
This will be very hard to do if you continue to see people as means to your end.
Yes.
Right.
Because the ends, the means are becoming easier to get via non-human means, right? The means to your end, right? I think that the leader in the next generation will see human beings as a worthy end in themselves, right? And what's really important about that is, yes, you can replace someone's task outcome, but you can't replace their relational need to matter to one another and to you as another human being, which is necessary to do all of the other things we say we want in our organizations. I will also say this, that I want to think about this as a reskilling, actually, of the human skills to see, hear, value, and need other people. Because here's something that not too many people are talking about. What's happened for the last 25 years is we've been able to communicate with each other via short transactions, digital transactions, right? And one of the things that we need to develop the skills to see, hear, value, and understand the next person in front of us is we need social learning. We need to be in social situations. We need, if you think of physical reps, we need social reps. Well, say if Ray emails me some bad news, I can now just send him a thumbs down emoji on my Slack platform or whatever it is. And I can just say, hey, I'm really sorry to hear that. I actually don't have to sit with Ray and show compassion and seek understanding. If you give me some good feedback, I can just say, hey, good job, kudos. Let's celebrate next week. I don't have to sit with you and say, hey, I'm really proud of you. I've seen for the last 5 years, you've been working really hard on this. This is the difference it made. And the less we're using these skills, the less proficient we're getting at them. So we're not filling the gap in these human skills in education. Less than 2% of the world gets formal education on how to listen well. Right. And so what's happening is all of these people, especially the younger generations who haven't had the social learning to learn how to be human with one another, are now leading teams. They're probably leading teams that are working on the AI transformation project.
Right. And I tell you personally, the Gladwell 10,000 rule didn't work for me. I've listened for 10,000 hours in my lifetime, and I'm still shitty listener.
Yeah, but you'll be surprised. You'd be surprised. But a lot of people don't have the same 10,000 hours that you get, because, and so when we go into a meeting, or let's give it a scenario, we go into a one-on-one and someone gives us feedback, without the escape hatch of the text to get, let's check in next week, we don't know what to do. And so we tend to do surface level analysis. We don't go deeper. And the person leaves feeling unheard and unseen. And the real crisis of this is that it's very hard for anything to matter to someone who doesn't believe that they matter to you.
Zach, let me like and then talk over you by asking an irrelevant question. No, I'm just kidding.
Right, exactly. Or
No.
or we like put off humanity. We'll say,
Yep.
you know, if we're communicating digitally, for example, if we're in Zoom or Teams or wherever we are, and you sense that I'm frustrated, and the meeting ends, you can just go to your next digital meeting. You don't have to sit with me in the hallway anymore and deal with that. And
Come on. We like awkward uncomfortableness.
I know, well, you all do. But what's happening is that these skills are withering, and we've actually, and it's happened since the 1960s, where that army psychologist labeled them soft.
Yeah.
And so we've actually, when we label something soft or simple, we have overconfidence bias and we approach it with less rigor. And here we are with more people than ever feeling invisible, unseen, unheard. The latest Gallup engagement report found that 39% of people, 39% said someone at work cared for them as a person.
Exactly. You're right. You have this framework, right, on noticing, affirming, and needing. I mean, these are things that I think have been bypassed by so many people, especially in leadership, because those are specific steps with specific transition points, with specific, acknowledgement that has to happen before you can actually do something.
Yeah, I think the most important question a leader can ask anybody right now, as a result, any relationship as a result of this show, is go ask somebody in your life or on your work or on your team, when you feel that you matter to me, what am I doing?
Wow.
Wow, that's going to get us in the doghouse real quick, Vala. I don't know about that.
No.
Probably the best question to ask.
Really, any project team too. When you feel that this work matters, what's happening around you?
I love that.
99% of leaders could not ask that question.
No, but when I felt I mattered, when a leader came to me and said, "How can I help?"
Absolutely.
When they volunteered, just 4 words, "How can I help?" Immediately, I was invited to the conversation where they were seeking my point of view. At the same time, their purpose was to help me achieve a certain. So instantly, I felt, you're not going to ask me that question if I didn't matter to you, because you're investing your time and energy to help me. And
you're not being glad handled. I mean, it's an honest question, right?
Yeah, but how often do leaders come and say, "How can I help?" They're asking for status. They're asking for. I mean, believe you me, you think it's common sense. It's not common. It's very rare.
Yeah, that's so important.
True.
And this stuff is common sense, but it is not common practice, because we haven't elevated it to the rigor of any other process or system on our teams. Right. We have processes and systems for everything else in our organizations, except making sure the people themselves feel that they matter.
Yeah. Yep.
This is where Tom Peters, who's been on our show several times, reminds us soft skills are the hardest skills to develop and practice. And people hear those words and I don't think they reflect and internalize how important that message is. But maybe in the age of automation and autonomy, it'll be your rate of learning and your good judgment and agency. These things will surface to the top as to who we want to surround ourselves with.
Well, Vala,
Ray, can I go back and actually answer your question? Oh, sorry. Can I go answer your question, Ray?
That's okay. Go ahead. Go for it.
Okay. Yeah. So you mentioned like the noticing, affirming, and needing practices. Yeah. Well, so that question I just asked, when do you most feel that you matter to a leader? We've asked that question, hundreds of people, then thousands of people. We surveyed them. And, if you're watching this and you listen right now, when have you most felt that you mattered in work? How many of you all are thinking about when you got your direct deposit, when you got a promotion, when you got a pay raise, when you got a employee of the month, when someone brought in a new recording artist to do a concert on your campus, right? Most people are thinking about not big actions. They're thinking about very small interactions where someone offered help, asked you if you needed anything, saw you in your struggles, remembered a difficulty you were working on a project a week later and said, "Hey, I wanted to check in on how that went. Anything you need from me." So what we found is that there were 3 components to these moments of mattering. And that's when people feel noticed and they feel truly seen and heard, when they feel like someone recognizes the unique details, ebbs and flows of their life and work and offers actions to show them that they're thought about, when they feel affirmed, when they know how their unique gifts make a unique difference, and then they feel needed. And this is really hard in the age of AI. When people know how they and their work are indispensable and non-disposable to some bigger outcome.
Wow. That's
some bigger outcome.
Really hard. That's going to be really hard because you talk about motivation, and then on the other hand, you talk about antimattering at the core. I mean, those are. I mean, it's deep, right?
It's really deep, but it's really psychological. From if we want to think about work and how we need more of humans, unique strengths, capabilities, ideas, perspectives, especially in the evolution of AI and how it's applied in our complex world than ever. And again, if we're not creating environments that give people the sense that they can contribute those things, then it's going to be very difficult to get all of those great ideas. But one of the, and it's psychological, one of the studies that stands out to me is Max Ringelmann in 1913. He was a French agricultural engineer. He had individuals pull on a rope as hard as they could, and he attached it to a little device that measured force, a dynamometer. And then he had those individuals get in groups and pull on that rope as hard as they could. And he measured force readings, and he added up the total force readings. And, if I ask a group of people, who do you think exerted the most total force? Most people say to me, Zach, it was the groups, obviously, but it was the individuals every single time. The individuals exerted the most total force. And why is that? Because they knew their effort was indispensable. It's called perceived indispensability of effort. It is so crucial to human performance that people feel and know exactly how they and what they're doing is indispensable, that it's the antithesis to everything we've been talking about, hardcore management, that don't forget you're replaceable, right? That's antithetical to what it means to be human. So I think that great leaders will be able to show people measurably exactly how what they're doing now has is measurably necessary for something bigger down the line.
So wait, with Ringelmann, that's actually crazy, right? So the total group effort was actually less than the individual output, right? That's the one, right? So
yes, yeah.
Okay.
So he added up the individuals exerted the more total force than the groups.
So that's saying the larger the group, the less productive we get.
Right. And so we called it social loafing. Like psychologists like to name things so other people can blame other people for stuff.
Yeah.
Really, that's how you sell books. You use
We're missing that. We're gonna have to.
I know. I'm gonna come up with better labels.
You got to say, "Hey, buy this book to find out what's wrong with everybody else but you."
Yeah, right.
And
that should be the title.
Yeah, that's how a lot of people sell books. But really, the phenomenon of that was really about this perceived dispensability, and that's the lesson that most people missed from that age of psychology, and that's been replicated in many different industries. It's not hard to see why. Like when you think that you're replaceable, you will act replaceable. Like when people feel replaceable, they act replaceable. When people feel irreplaceable in an authentic way, like that, and not just saying, "Hey, don't forget we need you," but really saying, "Hey, like your expertise, your talent, what you do as a person here on this team is necessary for this outcome, and I don't want you to forget that."
Yeah, yeah. And you got to do that. And be deeply honest with yourself, because another lesson that immigrants learn quickly is not to have a sense of entitlement, because the world doesn't owe you a thing. You have to earn the belonging and mattering, and don't expect anyone to gift that to you. And maybe the importance of resilience. But, as someone who was a refugee at age 10, I very quickly recognized the world doesn't owe you anything. And so something in your back of your mind is reminding you to earn the belonging and mattering. No one's going to give it to you. And the reason we love our parents, like you said, is because they loved us first.
Absolutely.
Right. But that's it. It's parents. After that, goodbye. You're on your own.
Yeah, but I will argue. I'll push back a little bit, because that need for attachment does not go away.
Sure, absolutely. And but
so,
the expectation that you're going to be surrounded by loving, unconditional, loving folks, forget about it.
Yeah, but I will say, sadly, what if that wasn't the case?
Oh, that's a great question.
What if my whole thing is, when I look at the New York Times bestseller list for all the self-help books, what I look at is that almost every single thing on that list is something that's inflicted on people by other people.
Yeah,
trauma.
Great point.
When someone says, "Don't forget, no one's coming to save you," I always say, "Well, what if they are?"
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely. And I love that. I love that.
What if we could both build that resilience? I love that mindset you have. My grandmother's an Italian immigrant.
Yeah.
She owns a furniture store. She tells me all the time, no one owes you anything. But what if we did both? Like, what if we created an environment that reminded people that they have what it takes to carry on, and we did the personal work to
I
develop.
love that.
the
I
resilience.
love that.
Zach, that would be the
Zach, one of my
political
favorite
party.
books.
What are you talking about?
Right, absolutely. Well, I could go on and on about how anti-mattering has been exploited for division to because we will find somebody if we can find some way to matter, because again, we're all newborns reaching out for someone who will keep us alive.
No, absolutely.
If we can find someone that says, "Hey, I see you, you're significant," we'll do anything, even irrational, bizarre things to get it.
My last question to you. My favorite book is How Will You Measure Your Life? Late Professor Clay Christensen.
Yeah.
And he did a TED Talk. I believe it was a TED Talk. I'm not sure. Ray and I have watched him present live many times, so I get confused. Was it a TED Talk or did I hear him say it live? But he said, when my interview with God, he will ask, as you know, he's a deeply religious man. God will say, Clay, when I put you in position to help others, what did you do? That's the answer. That's the question I need to answer. And when I think about your book and I think about Professor Clay Christensen, maybe the best way to measure your life is how you help others feel like they matter. And my question to you is, how do you account for your work in terms of helping people feel like they matter? Are you constantly taking notice of your students, your colleagues, your clients? Are you obsessed about helping people feel like they matter? And how do you do that?
What my research started with frontline janitors. We embedded ourselves with a group of janitors for a year.
You are not your job. I love that.
For a year and a half, trying to understand what people in these very difficult situations, how they come to experience meaning. And I'll never forget, one janitor said to me, I find the most meaning in my job when I'm cleaning the bathrooms in these university dormitories on Monday mornings. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, well, every time I go into that bathroom, I say to myself, I'm cleaning this bathroom so that these kids don't get sick. And that mentality, like what I've learned is that what's purposeful isn't always pleasurable. And I think so many want work and everything to be pleasurable all the time. But being able to know you're so that, I see my work as trying to illuminate that no matter where you are right now, whatever you're doing, if you're in the world, you have an impact on a human being, not in a cliche way, but literally in a systems thinking way.
Zach, you just hit a fucking grand slam with that story. That was awesome.
Awesome. What is your? I get a good lesson is like I want to help everybody know that they're so that. Awesome. I want to help everybody know they're so that.
That was the janitor with a purpose of cleaning so the kids don't get sick.
Isn't that amazing? Isn't that like she should write a book? Just
unbelievable.
A way to develop that mindset.
Right? Zach, I acknowledge this. This was amazing, and I need more. Just kidding. Anyways, we're Zach Mercurio, author of The Power of Mattering: How Leaders Can Create a Culture of Significance.
Congrats on your bestseller.
We'll see you in the green room. Best-selling author here. Appreciate that. Amazon, of course, it's coming out May 13th. All right, cool. So, hey, thank you for being on the show, and of course, we'll see you in the green room. Vala, off to you.
That was amazing how you can just add like 20 seconds to the narrative and just like. What a killer story at the end. And no wonder his book is
number one. We're going to get him to our conference in October.
That was awesome. All three guests were amazing. We could have talked to all three of them for the entire hour, as far as I'm concerned. Okay, no show next week. So we'll be back on.
Apologize. Son's graduating.
Same. So we both have celebrations next Friday. Both of us have our eldest graduating.
No one's off payroll, but they're done.
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to celebrate next week, and we will come back the following week, May 16th, which will be episode 399. Karthik Naran, Group Chief Executive, Technology and CTO at Accenture. I think 500,000 people work for Karthik, so he's got a big job at one of the biggest, or the biggest, advisory system integrator in the world. Patrick McGee, author of Apple in China, the capture of the world's
This
greatest
is a
company.
hot book. This is a very hot book. He's been working
And
2 years on it.
Andreas Tapia and Michael Buffett, co-authors of The 5 Disciplines of Inclusive Teams, How to Unlock Collective Power to Achieve Breakthrough. Only we would have 4 guests on one episode when we have one of the biggest executives in the tech industry as our first guest. But that's what happens at Disrupt. We're all about giving access to as many people as we can who are putting a dent in the universe. Ray, closing comments for episode 398.
Amazing thing. We're looking at introspection. Sergey really helped us understand what we need to do to make our agentic AI more super intelligent. I think that's the way to think about this. They're really going to get a lot more intelligent and optimized. If we think about what Paul is talking about, the way we lead is going to change. And you're right, Vala. We are probably the last generation that managed just people only. We'll be managing agents. But good news is, the way we lead is going to be important, especially when we look at agents and non-agents. And more importantly, why do we matter? I think Zach raises that question. And I think it's important as we work with the few, fewer and fewer resources at hand and more agents on place. How do we notice a firm and need people? I think is important in terms of the framework of people that are out there. But that is it, everyone. We're done with this episode. So,
If my head is spinning in a good way. If it's Friday, it's Disrupt TV. See you in 2 weeks. Thank you for watching.
And we'll see our guests in the green room.